No. I don't know what the experts say about body language, but how do you feel about his body language?
Today, we're going to talk about Caylee Anthony's parents, George and Cindy. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Yeah, interesting. We'll see some of their lie detector tests. This is from an A&E special called Caylee Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test.
I need you to brace yourself because the allegations you're about to hear are pretty intense.
My nightmare last night, it was similar to other things that happened to me growing up.
What was the nightmare last night?
My father was holding me down.
Jesus Christ, come on.
That happens again and again and again. When I was 8 years old, my father started to come into my room at night. I was physically hurt, and I can't tell Mommy what happened.
She never called me Mommy. She always called me Mom.
She'll get mad at me. That's what I was told.
Wow. Wow. Do you have any thoughts about watching her, seeing her in this light, telling her version of events?
It hurts.
What she's saying is what you did to her
I know.
was so horrid that she repressed it.
Yeah, I know what that is. It's a good fabrication on her part. First thing is, I know she's lying. You know she's lying. For all the years she lived in this house with us, we were always happy with each other.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so look, let's talk a little bit about filmmaking. Filmmaking, for me, and filmmaking of drama is all about reactions. Not necessarily who's doing the action, but how everybody else is reacting to that. And it just so happens in this particular case that we've got some really interesting, I would say, filmmaking going on. Really dramatic filmmaking. It's less of a documentary for me and turns out to be more of a dramatic film. We get the reaction there of the interviewer. I think we see from him real sorrow as he looks at the father and sees the father's reaction to the daughter accusing. Real sorrow from him. He turns to the wife, the father, and says, she's lying. And it cuts to the reaction of the wife, and it's deadpan. There's nothing there. There's no yeah, absolutely. And there's no, not at all. Nothing happens there. So, I mean, an interesting collage of reactions. But here's the thing. There's no panning of the camera. I have no idea if that interviewer's reaction was the reaction that was at the time. I have absolutely no idea if the wife's reaction is the reaction at the time. Yeah. Zero idea what's going on because it's cut, and it's all about filmmaking and dramatic reactions. So what do I think's going on here? Some really good dramatic filmmaking is going on. But what do I know to be true about nothing at this point from their reactions, and it's mainly about the reactions, not about the subjects. Chase, what do you think? What do you got on this one?
Yeah, I completely agree. I do not think that was a normal human reaction that the wife had, so I don't think that was a part of that same timestamp either. This clip on the TV shows what I think is an incredibly stunning lack of feeling and a very vivid display of someone seeking reactions from the audience instead of recalling memories. When I'm talking about Casey's clip here, seeking a reaction instead of recalling a memory. When I heard the mommy comment, this was instantaneous. It hit me in the gut. That this one seemingly small comment from the mother here is enough to make all of my hair stand up this morning. And if the word mommy was interjected here just to make it seem more innocent and more like a childhood memory, then this is next level illness. And the mom is playing with jewelry here. You see her doing that during the video. Women are more likely than men to reach up for a necklace or a bracelet. Research shows us that women are more likely to associate jewelry with identity. So this is why you're more likely to see that there. But the father says a phrase that really stood out to me. He said, "That's a good fabrication on her part." What? I thought this was bizarre to see someone complimenting the degree to which their daughter can lie and manipulate. And this is followed by a strange confirmation-seeking glance and a question to his wife, like looking over, like, you agree with me, right? And his behavior is uncomfortable here watching the clip. I might attribute some of this to the camera, some to the fact they've probably seen this video before. I mean, it's been out there. And maybe they're being told, hey, you know what? This is TV, so I want you to pretend and react to this like it's your first time. So maybe they're going through that. And I think there's a lot of editing here, but I thought happy with each other. Like our whole lives were happy with each other. I think that was an unusual choice of words, but I don't know anything more yet. So we'll kind of dig into more context in a second. Scott, what did you see?
All right. Yeah, I agree with you. The editing on this is atrocious. You can tell they've got, I'm under the impression they've got a story they want to tell. We were talking a little bit before this, and Mark and I were saying the same stuff about the editing. It's questionable. But if we look at this from, let's say, a profiler's perspective, which is at this point, since there's not a whole lot going on, is what we're looking for is for the lie detector parts. Let's take a look at their clothes. They're dressed super casually. Like this guy just happened to show up with a film crew. I mean, he's wearing a golf shirt and shorts. She's wearing like some kind of a top you'd wear at Target when you're out shopping and you don't have anything planned or anything going on. They're really in relaxed mode. She's not wearing makeup. And another thing is they're both really still. They stay fairly still during this, which is understandable because there's a lot of information coming in, whether they've seen it or not before. I would guess they haven't seen it because of how still they're being, and they're really focused on the screen, on the television. So I'm under the impression they probably haven't seen it. But then again, you never know. Like you're saying, Chase, you never know with things like this. From what we've seen in these clips, it could all be a setup. But George starts adapting with his hands. You can see that going up. Of course, that's normal because he's under a lot of stress. Then we see when she says, she never called me mommy, George purses his lips while he's adapting. Another thing that's interesting is when someone's mouth goes down the sides like that, it's hard to do. But that usually indicates that there's extreme emotional distress there. So there's something going on with their relationship, with George's relationship with Casey. I'm under the impression, anyway, that that's what's happening. That makes him feel, I mean, not just because his daughter's calling him but because, well, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'll get to why I think that's important there. But they both have fairly blank expressions the whole time, which is a little bit odd because you'd think you'd see a lot of anger and a lot of concern. Not a whole lot of that. It's a lot of the eyebrows up, request for approval, which is a little bit odd, or a blank stare. But all this stuff still, again, suggests psychological discomfort. So obviously they wouldn't like this. You wouldn't like this. Nobody would. But I think that's what's happening. When the interviewer says, watching her, seeing her, we see a micro expression of pursed lips, and then a full-blown expression of what I call stress mouth or compressed lips. This indicates a great deal of stress as well. So at the same time, we see that those eyebrows up for a request for approval, which is something Greg coined. If you're giving somebody information, you're making sure they've got. Why don't you explain request for approval?
Yeah, well, all that simply means I'm looking for your approval. I may say, hey, this catfish was this big. I could be lying. I could be telling the truth. But what I'm after is approval. And what you're looking for is when it is used. It's, this is the way we communicate with other people. So we're sending a signal, hey, you get it, don't you? Or, hey, believe this, don't you? That's what I mean by it.
Yeah. So then the mother, her name is Cindy, she continues on with this like a blank stare, like she's taking in all this information. And it's that look you have where it's building up inside him. So I don't know if she's a powder keg or whatever, but she doesn't look like somebody you'd want to mess with or you get on the wrong side of. But her eyes are fixed on that screen, as they should be. So that's normal, I think, there. But I think we're seeing a lot of inner dialogue with her as she's listening to this and thinking, she never said mommy. I bet she couldn't wait to say that or bring that out. But overall, I think this shows a lot of psychological discomfort here. Greg, what do you got?
Have you ever Googled your name and been shocked by how much information is available about you on those public information sites? Things like your past residences, family members, even your current address are available. I would have been happy in my interrogation days to have a smidgen of the information available about you today at the click of a button. These data brokers are selling that information to robocallers and spammers and others who want to know more information about you, like maybe your current address. And these data brokers are required to take that information down by law if you send an opt-out request, but they make it hard to do. Our sponsor today, Aura, can identify those data brokers who are exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you can't see. It's easy to set up, so you don't have to download several different apps to get things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft insurance, and more. And you get everything at one affordable price. So let Aura do the work of keeping you safe online so you can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I like it because I can go about my business, look at one app, tell what's going on, make sure that I'm not missing something else, and I can do what I do. You can continue to let other people profit off your private information, or you can go to aura.com/TBP. That's aura.com/TBP to start your 2-week free trial. There's also a link in the description below. Let's talk about dynamic. I was talking to Pyle one day and I was saying, what's interesting about interrogation is we're a little bit of statement analysis, we're a little bit of body language, we're a little bit of behavior profiling, we're a little bit of all that, but it's all at one time. When you're standing in front of someone, all this stuff is working at absolutely the same time. So you have to look at everything, at the personal dynamics and all these pieces. So let's look at this. Let's first start with the simplest. And Chase, I agree with you and with all of you. Mommy, this mommy thing, it's not just the word mommy, it's the cadence. It's the pitch. It's the tone. Everything about it is out of whack. It's orphaned. Listen to Caylee Anthony going, bada, 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 mommy. And she slows down as she says it. It's orphaned. It's alone. So you, as a person listening to someone at work or on a phone call or something in the background, you don't need to see someone to listen for a change in verbal, meaning choice of words, mommy, not mother, not mom. Looking for a difference in vocal, the pitch, tone, or cadence slowed and changed. All of those things tell you something is wrong. So we don't need to hear the word mommy, but we do. And we hear it orphaned, so we immediately say something is wrong with that. Now, her mom says, hey, never call me mommy. Well, there's a good tell right off. Let's talk about dynamics. There's clearly, these are not lovey-dovey. This is not the place you're going to go and see kumbaya between these two people. If you watch this show, you'll see there's a fair amount of dysfunction between these two. And if you want to see what dysfunction looks like, just get to where he's in the car and being asked questions about their relationship. Well, does a person, let's say Chase and I have bad blood, do I go, Chase, I didn't do that? Never, never. You're going to try to hedge at every corner. You're not going to throw yourself to the hounds with the person sitting right next to you who might throw it back at you. So there's one good indicator he's being honest. There's also a couple of others. I think this guy's jittery. He's had a really severe automobile accident where he was in a halo for months. He was rolled a car a bunch of times and that kind of stuff and was lying there for a while. So I don't know what part that plays because I don't know his baseline before that happened, but he's certainly an apprehensive kind of fella. If you want to know when he's watching this, whether it's for the first time or the ninth, he's apprehensive. He's got his hands crossed and he's milling his fingers. I call that sacred space. I'm making a space that I own and making it comfortable by doing something I always do. When she starts to talk, you see him do that eye roll and that exasperated breathe out. That's a great indicator that he is upset about something. Now, what's interesting is we'll see it play out even more as we go. But he does that wow internal voice. Look, if you're busted for something, you typically don't throw your chin out when you're busted. You typically lower your chin, protect your throat, or do something like that. We don't see it. We see him throw his chin up. He huffs in exasperation, closes his eyes. That to me looks like frustration. And then the comment hurts. You said lip compression. Scott, I agree with you. That is the profound lip compression. It's not a quick compression. It's closed. I see people do that all the time to control emotion. And then when he looks over at his mother and there's just that cold, deadpan face, wow, I'm with you, Mark. I sure don't want to go there. This is a good start.
One of those tape replays.
I need you to brace yourself because the allegations you're about to hear are pretty intense.
My nightmare last night, it was similar to other things that happened to me growing up.
What was the nightmare last night?
My father was holding me down and raping me.
Jesus Christ, come on.
That happens again and again and again. When I was 8 years old, my father started to come into my room at night. I was physically hurt, and I can't tell mommy what happened.
She never called me mommy. She always called me mom.
She'll get mad at me. That's what I was told.
Wow. Wow.
Do you have any thoughts about watching her, seeing her in this light, telling her version of events?
It hurts.
What she's saying is what you did to her
I know.
was so horrid that she repressed it.
Yeah, I know what that is. It's a good fabrication on her part. First thing is, I know she's lying. You know she's lying. For all the years she lived in this house with us, we were always happy with each other.
Regarding sexual contact with Caylee, do you intend to lie on this test?
No.
Did you ever have sexual contact with Caylee?
No.
Did you ever touch Caylee for sexual gratification?
No.
Have you ever cheated on your wife, Cindy?
No.
I don't know what the experts say about body language, but how do you feel about his body language?
If George is uncomfortable, he'll fidget.
And what's going on here?
Oh, just trying to figure out what to do with my hands.
Stop moving your feet, George.
I'm sorry.
Way too much. As an adult, have you ever had sexual contact with a minor?
No.
This part of the test is over. Please remain still. We're going to have to do it a few times.
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Okay with that? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever touch Caylee for sexual gratification?
No.
So on the polygraph exam, there's a lot of redundancy built into the protocol. So we ask the same question several times. Have you ever cheated on your wife, Cindy?
No.
And we come up with basically a pattern of truthfulness or a pattern of deception. Have you always been a 10 on the sexual integrity scale?
Yes.
Did you ever have sexual contact with Caylee?
No.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
So remember, they were supposed to have not seen the video in the first one we saw. And Chase, to your point, they may or may not. But he starts off with an elevated stress. It may be intentional to control. You see that forced adapter, that finger pressing on the counter, on the table next to him. That's an adapter. Whether it's intentional or not is a different story. Some people believe that if you press really hard, you'll be able to pass a lie detector, all kinds of things like that. So I'd look at that and say, why are you doing that? And he could be pressing to the point of pain, could be related to neurological damage, don't know. The mother is doing sacred space. She's got her arms crossed and then she's doing this hand thing. But I'm not sure she's crossed her arms and done that to block anybody out. I think it's just a comfort thing with her arms stacked up on top of her abdomen. But she does start releasing nervous energy. And I love the fact that Tony, the interviewer, calls them on their body language. It's a beautiful thing. And he calls out some good ones. Those are adapters, and what we call an adapter is a release of nervous energy. There's going to be baggage. This guy's jittery. But what is interesting is I didn't find anything he said in there to be outlandish. He was pretty consistent with his no. There were a couple of questions I had about what is the sexual integrity scale and exactly who sets that. How do you know? How do you know? Am I 1? Am I 10? Am I what? I don't know. Is 1 good or 10 good? Which is good? I would be asking some questions if I were committing to something like that. But it's the only place we see this finger press and that other adapter. And I see him prepared and braced, but not surprised. Look, if you're in a polygraph, it's stressful for people because they believe they're magical voodoo things that tell the truth. B, you're being recorded in front of the whole world. And C, we have already seen a little bit of baggage between him and his wife, and they're asking questions about infidelity. How much pressure do you think all of that stacked together puts on a person? Mark, what do you got?
I'm with you on this sexual integrity scale. There has to have been a conversation about this before, or this is a scale which I've never heard of. I mean, that's possible. There's 4 of us here, and I don't think anybody here has heard of this scale. So hang on. So yeah, but maybe he's one of the people who knows about this scale. That'd be an anomaly. Scale. It's a secret scale. We don't know about it. He does. So okay. So you're not showing us that conversation before, but that's okay. I mean, so long as we go. So you're making a piece of entertainment. And I get that. It's on TV, like we're on YouTube. This is entertainment. We're trying to keep you engaged and have fun ourselves. It's so there's stuff that we show you, stuff that we don't show you. We get that, but we're not going to cut up to the extent that they're cutting up what's happening here. For example, there is the distance between the gap between the first question and the first answer of no. I mean, that's beautiful. It's just like he's straight in there. No, feels good to me. Feels really good. I'm like, okay, you set up that first scene where I'm now worried. You cut that in such a way that I'm like, I don't think your wife believes you. Now, I don't know whether her reaction was anything to do with what was going on here. So I'm worried. I'm worried for him. But look at that first answer. It's a straight no. I'm like, good. He's on it. He's on a roll. But now the distance between the second question and the second answer, there's a huge gap. But the camera didn't pan across. It wasn't a 2-shot. I have zero idea as to what the actual length of pause between the first question and the second question and the second answer is. So I mean, were I trying to create dramatic pause, I would stick a lot of room noise in between that and eke that pause out. I'd maybe go to a shot of the wife and a reaction there of like, she doesn't know what's going on. They do that. They actually do what I just said there, which is to eke out on the third one, another reaction going in there. And we don't know whether that was the real reaction. So it's too choppy for me to have any kind of real idea around the veracity of these answers. What would be great is to have the polygraph information alongside, but they're going to hold that to the end because they want me to stay watching until the very end because there's adverts in between and they need me to watch the adverts so everybody gets paid. And I totally get that. I totally get everybody needs paying. Everybody needs to get some money. But I've just got to keep that in mind as I watch through this, that by this second scene here that we're watching, I already know they're purposely trying to put in dramatic pauses to keep me hooked. And it might do it for me. I might get dragged into this. So I got to be careful around this. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right. Well, on the first no, some are going to say he shook his head yes when he said no. Actually, that's what I call a confirmation nod with what they're talking about, but it's more of a swallow than anything here. On one hand, we'll look at that and say, oh, he swallowed, so that meant something there. I don't think it is. I think he's just nervous. He's really stressed in the situation. Like you were saying, Greg, he's in front of his wife. He's on TV. He's got a professional examiner test, give him the test or examining him. So I think this is normal behavior for this situation. Now, after the question, did you ever have sexual contact with Casey? We see a small, quick turn down or downturn of his mouth again, and compressed lips or stressed mouth, as I like to call it. Again, that's that profound distress, emotional distress that's caused, because that's real important to him. Because I'm under the impression that he didn't do that. So I think that's why we're seeing that. Again, this is all normal for the situation, all the stress cues we're seeing here. The mom is nervous, so of course that's why we're seeing her adapt with her thumbs. And the pause before answering is going to seem odd to a lot of people as well. But in my opinion, like with Mark, there's no telling how long that pause really, what was going on then, because they cut away and they cut back. Even when they're sitting there watching, we're seeing the mother and the interviewer talking, and they show that screen up there of the George and the examiner. And the examiner's talking, his mouth isn't even moving with that at the same time. That's a different shot there. So I think what we're seeing in George is he's trying to hide those emotions, hold those emotions back, because it's really something that triggers that upheaval of what his daughter's saying about him. That most likely isn't true. I'm not seeing any deception in this at all. So again, I think he's apprehensive because of the situation and being there, but I don't think he's being deceptive. Chase, what do you got?
I just feel like this is like us trying to profile this is like us analyzing an episode of The Bachelor. Like it's overproduced and it's hard to sift through what's reality. But polygraphs do not measure deception. Like this guy is saying, he made a big mistake here. Maybe it was a slip up. I've done it before, but they don't measure deception. They measure physiological reactions to emotional changes and stress. So the questions actually were really good. He is a damn good polygraph examiner. And the examiner, in my opinion, is about 10 times more important than the machine. If you have a really good polygraph examiner, the machine doesn't even need to be plugged in. And I wish I had time to get into that, but it doesn't. And I think y'all would probably agree. There's some emotional 100%. Reaction here to the fidgeting. There's maybe a new baseline when somebody changes environment. So we can't compare couch baseline to polygraph interrogation room baseline. So this is maybe pretty normal. So fidgeting, hesitancy happen more along the question. There's probably a lot of emotion around since he's been accused of something and his life was probably deeply affected by the accusation. So there's not a big cluster there. If the machine is on your body and they're hooked up to a polygraph machine and someone tells you the test is over, it's not over. There's a good tip for you. When your machine's connected to your body and somebody says, oh, that's it, that's not it. Just so you know. There's a strong sternocleidomastoid movement, this little muscle right here that jumps out of the neck. In response to a lot of these questions, this is a fear response most of the time, but you'll also see this in people that are trying to suppress anger and sadness many, many times. You go to a funeral, you're going to see a lot of this same exact thing, especially when they're doing the eulogy and stuff. I think we're seeing that here. There's always going to be fear of not being believed that can be visible during a test like this, and we have to take that into consideration every time as we get this. So I had to get a polygraph every couple of years in the military, and most people do if you have a clearance or top secret clearance. And they always told me I'd make a really crappy car salesman. And that's all I got.
You know, the best part of the test is now over is people spill their guts the minute that happens. Forget the machine. They just feel so relieved. They go, oh, thank God. And they start talking normally. It's such a beautiful thing. Sorry, Scott.
And I agree with you, Chase. It's not as much as the machinery as it is the person. And let me tell you, you guys watching, you people watching, if you ever get a situation where they say, will you take the lie detector test? Take it. And before you do, you say, I'll take it on one condition. You get me the person who's been doing this the longest. I want the oldest person doing this, and I want the person who's done this the longest. And I want somebody right out of it who's just getting into it and really likes it a lot. It's really good at it. That's not what I want. I want the oldest man or woman you've got that knows how to do this. That's who I want, because they're going to be pros at looking at you and answering or asking the questions, everything. So that's what you want. You can do it. But but make them agree to. And if somebody like 28 years old comes in, no offense to those people at all, you want the oldest person though. That's the key.
Really quick.
Let me say,
have a better idea. What?
As an illustration, Scott, I'll Venmo you $10 if you can do this.
Okay.
There's a military handheld GPS back in the day called a plugger. PLGR is the acronym. The antenna was the size of a paper towel tube.
Yeah.
And I have visibly seen this in the room. Someone use this as a lie detector and just hold a button down to make it beep. And they're like, oh, that's deceptive. But it was a person with a tremendous amount of skill using a GPS with nearly dead batteries that has nothing to do with lie detection as the lie detector.
Would you think, Chase, do you think you could also tell somebody they're moving their feet when they aren't moving their feet?
Sure,
do you think you could also tell a whole audience that somebody's moving their feet when the audience can't even see that they're moving their feet? Yeah. I mean, that's...
Well, and Chase, the first time I know of that's Dave Wilson. If you know Dave, Dave is a Marine Corps guy, really hard-nosed guy, one of the best interrogators I know. He actually used a Game Boy, and this was in the Somalia days, so it was before pluggers even existed. Guys were using all kinds of tricks and techniques. And I always say all a good polygrapher is a great interrogator with a prop. That's it. Because if they're good, they're good. They're not. This guy's good. You should watch the show if you want to see what he does do well, because he sets them up and says, hey, I can't tell if you're lying, but he even says, what's happening is I'm measuring the results of stress created by you trying to hide false information. That he does a beautiful job of that. Actually, more intimidating the way he approaches it.
But he does make the mistake of saying, I'm measuring stress because of false information.
Yeah.
That's not true.
One of those tape replays.
Regarding sexual contact with Caylee, do you intend to lie on this test?
No.
Did you ever have sexual contact with Caylee?
No.
Did you ever touch Caylee for sexual gratification?
No.
Have you ever cheated on your wife, Cindy?
No.
I don't know what the experts say about body language, but how do you feel about his body language?
If George is uncomfortable, he'll fidget.
And what's going on here?
Oh, just trying to figure out what to do with my hands.
Stop moving your feet, George.
I'm sorry.
Way too much. As an adult, have you ever had sexual contact with a minor?
No.
This part of the test is over. Please remain still. We're going to have to do it a few times.
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Okay with that? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever touch Caylee for sexual gratification?
No.
So on the polygraph exam, there's a lot of redundancy built into the protocol. So we asked the same question several times. Have you ever cheated on your wife, Cindy?
No.
And we come up with basically a pattern of truthfulness or a pattern of deception. Have you always been a 10 on the sexual integrity scale?
Yes.
Did you ever have sexual contact with Caylee?
No.
I'm just a little confused. This whole statement about the sweet smell of sweat.
When I said I smelled her hair and that sweet sweat that she had, I did. It was just the truth in my heart, how I felt about my granddaughter. Whenever our granddaughter would be outside, when you got a chance to hold her and she would give hugs that were just so fantastic, you would smell just a gentle, what am I supposed to do, push my granddaughter away and say, you stink? I felt great to get that hug from her and have that with me. But for her to call me what she just called me,
a pedophile.
Yeah, that was never in my physicality or my brain.
You meant you loved hugging your kids when they were little.
I did.
Love hugging your granddaughter. But Caylee's writing a narrative.
You're right.
I see where she is going to use that against you.
Is this the first time you've heard this suggestion that you were molesting your granddaughter.
Oh, this right here, yeah, it's first time I've heard this. Wow.
Did you molest Caylee?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So this is another allegation against you.
Certainly is.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
This is pretty genuine. There's positive emotional recall here. The eyes go upward, the head goes back, the eyes close, arm movement to replicate holding a child and leaning back. This is what you look for when you ask people these questions. This is what you look for when somebody's asked a difficult question to recall something and kind of make a denial at the same time. His whole body is recalling this with genuine care. And then there's genuine defiance. There's this chin thrust that he does when he's making these denials. And just like Greg said a second ago, we'll tuck our chin down because fear makes our body instinctively protect arteries. We have the carotid arteries here. We have the brachial arteries here. So our arms will come in, our head will come down, shoulders come up. We don't see any of that. We're seeing the opposite. I personally, I don't know what y'all are going to say. I don't see any clusters of anything relevant here at all as far as deception and stress. There's no change to baseline other than the withheld sadness that comes when he's hearing about the allegations. That's all I got. Greg?
Yeah. So first thing I'm going to tell you is the two things I see clusters of are poor word choice and inability to finish a sentence. That doesn't make you guilty of anything. I have two friends who cannot finish a sentence. One of my friends has said to me, I'll get tired of him and say something. He'll say, let me finish my story. And I say, I've known you since you're 17. I've never seen it. So let's just hop ahead and you tell me what happened. So some people need to fill in data because they're trying to give you information as they're trying to think about what you need to know in order to understand their point. This guy does it. Lots of granularity where there shouldn't be any. And poor choices of words like sweet sweat. And he's going to say other things, physicality. Those are words that make him sound like he's making up something. But I'm with you, Chase. Indignant chin thrust. His head's up. Those muscles are tightening as he's trying to control emotion because of how he feels. There's no shame. There's indignation. There's exasperation and hard exhales. Like I say, poor choice of words, but he does downright eye accessing and emotion as he's welling up. And I thought I was going to see tears there for a minute. As he said, it's not in my physicality. As his wife is starting to not poke him about, she's going to use it against you. All this stuff together, I don't usually, I say when you see a person ready to confess, their chin drops. When you see a person doing this, confessing, that's dangerous because they're usually not telling the truth. They're just trying to get out of it. In this case, I see a very contained person who's trying not to show his emotion, who's probably the emotions right on the surface. I was looking to see if he had TBI from this whole thing because he's a pretty emotional guy, considering I think he was in law enforcement for a while and did some other things for a while. Scott, what do you got?
Wait, Scott, I'm sorry, Greg, can you unpack what TBI is real quick?
Oh, yeah, traumatic brain injury. Because, look, guys, we don't know. We're learning about that stuff all the time, and you get it from all kinds of angles. He had a really horrific auto accident where the axle came out of the right side of his car, and he rolled and flipped it like 3 or 4 times on the road and ended up on the side of the road. And just concussion for your brain can change the way it functions. Minor concussions, much less something major. Lots of soldiers come back with personality deviations, lots of differences from. You don't have to have a strike to your head. It could be concussion and that kind of thing, like a concussion grenade or an IED, an improvised explosive device going off near you. So people's personalities can change, just like repetitive head trauma. The NFL guys, a lot of them go and donate their brains to science because they get from repetitive head trauma, personality changes, and all kinds of things can happen. So that's what I had there. Scott, what do you got?
All right.
Thanks.
Going back to the things Mark and I were talking about, when they started asking about the sweet sweat and all that, I was just grossed out because it's so obvious what they're trying to do here. And it's that same thing we see in politics where somebody will say something that sounds a little bit odd and they'll blow it up into, oh, you're a perv or you're a this or you're a murderer and all that. I couldn't go. It just grossed me out so bad. I couldn't, that they're focusing on that. I couldn't watch any more of that. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. Look, clearly it's being set up in order to paint him in a bad light to start with, because we've got to create a drama here. And if from moment one, if the first scene was like, well, it's quite obvious, that you're fine, there'd be no show to watch. So look, it is. I agree with Greg and Chase here that I think we see real sorrow here, and it's being held back. Here's what really clinches it as a cluster for me is the whole group there. It's never just you. It's like who you're with and how they're reacting. And let's just suggest in this case, though it's hard to tell, that the reactions are placed quite close to each other. It's the job of that interviewer, I would say, for this particular documentary, in order to push the drama by being confrontational. And what we see from him is moments of real empathy when he's taking on the sorrow. And it's his job not to do that. He should be working really hard to go, I'm going to stand a distance from this. Not only am I going to do that, I'm going to push at this very, very aggressively. And we see on his face his empathy for it, his sorrow. So it's working on him. So I would say this is true sorrow here from the male involved who's accused here, because we're seeing empathy from somebody who's meant to be not being empathetic at this point and should be working hard against it. Most likely, therefore, true emotion. Yeah, that's all I got.
This is what bothers me.
I'm just a little confused. This whole statement about the sweet smell of sweat.
When I said I smelled her hair and that sweet sweat that she had, I did. It was just the truth in my heart, how I felt about my granddaughter. Whenever our granddaughter would be outside, when you got a chance to hold her and she would give hugs that were just so fantastic, you would smell just a gentle, what am I supposed to do, push my granddaughter away and say, you stink? I felt great to get that hug from her and have that with me. But for her to call me what she just called me,
a pedophile.
Yeah, that was never in my physicality or my brain.
You loved hugging your kids when they were little.
I did.
Love hugging your granddaughter. But as Casey's writing a narrative,
you're right.
I see where she is going to use that against you.
Is this the first time you've heard this suggestion that you were molesting your granddaughter?
Oh, this right here, yeah, it's first time I've heard this. Wow.
Did you molest Caylee?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So this is another allegation against you.
It certainly is. You know how hard it was for me to go in front of the grand jury? They kept on asking me the same kind of questions. Who do you believe is responsible? Casey. No matter what happened, drowning, giving her something.
And you said that before the grand jury?
I most certainly did, sir. I most certainly did. I didn't pull any punches. I will go probably to my grave always believing that Casey harmed Caylee.
Look, the burning question has always been, what happened to Caylee on the day she disappeared?
This is extremely important for George and I. This is what we had disagreed upon for the last 15 years.
Casey has a completely new version of what happened on the day Caylee disappeared.
And it all starts with George waking her up and with Caylee nowhere to be found.
I came back around towards the front porch. He's standing there with her. She's soaking wet. I can see him standing there with her in his arms and hand her to me and telling me that it's my fault, that I did that I caused that. And I just collapsed with her in my arms.
Casey knows CPR. I made her take classes.
He takes her from me and he immediately softens his tone and tells me it's going to be okay. That she was going to be okay. That's what he said to me. I wanted to believe him because I wanted her to be okay.
She can say that so easy.
And George, you're hearing this from your daughter's mouth for the first time.
Does that make sense to any rational person, any sane person? You would hand off a lifeless baby soaking wet and not attempt to do something? Plus, George knew CPR.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
So I'm going to talk about the first scene there, where we see one of the greatest displays of defiance there, I would say. Casey harmed Caylee, and up comes his chin in a real big defiant manner. I think he says before that, I'm going to, I support that to my grave. So they're super congruent. I mean, nothing really more congruent than those two things. Now, maybe we'd like to see a bigger cluster, but with everything that we've seen so far, looks to me like he's being very, very honest about his idea that it's Casey and nobody else involved in this act. The second scene there, I just can't get over how the dogs are there. The dogs disappeared. The dogs are there. There's one dog. There's two dogs. So I'm just like, what? Like, I mean, I know what dogs are like. They can get off the sofa and on the sofa and off the sofa and on. But you got three dogs there. It's like there's too much pattern change that I've got to go, I have no idea, what point these reactions came from. So, for my money, I end up going, look, any idea I have of what I think is going on here could be too heavily based on the narrative that they're clearly trying to put together, because it's some kind of montage game of Scrabble, David Bowie, writing exercise of just take the clips, throw them up, see what order they come in, and how good a story it tells. But that first piece for me seemed strong. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right, I think this is a great example of what I call, again, those confirmation nods when he says he'll go to his grave believing Casey harmed Caylee. And then, so that for me, a lot of times people say, no, I didn't, but they'll say, no, I didn't. And it'll be that almost like illustrators. They are illustrators, but I've gone ahead and called them confirmation nods. But that's what we're seeing there, are confirmation nods. And I think that's important, because he's coming across with his truth, as Greg always says. So when he says, notice he says harmed, not killed or murdered, because it's tough for him to say that. It's tough for him to think that his daughter would have done that, I think. It's hard for him to believe that. That's why I've seen so many stress cues and all this, because of who he's talking about. And it seems like I'm starting to get the feeling that she's turned on him. I mean, obviously she has, but I mean, I think there's something more involved in there than, and I'll get to that later on. I'll keep talking about it, but I'll get to that later on. But it seems like he's a little bit upset in the wrong ways sometimes. But now when the mother's answering the questions, she's got her hand up with her fingers on her temple, pressing a little bit. That's a great example of stress cue. And that, which of course we call that adapting. And we've all seen 1,000 times. And then she covers her mouth with her hand as she's listening. I do that a lot when I'm talking. It's fairly common. A lot of people do it. I don't know why I do it, but it's for her. That's indicative of listening. When somebody starts doing those kind of things, they cover, not because they don't want to speak or they're hiding something, just because they think better when they're touching their mouth or doing this. Because if I'm listening or thinking about something, quite often I'll do that. That looks really weird and goofy. I don't even know I'm doing it. So I think that's what she's doing as she's listening. Then I read all the comments, and I get them all the time about people saying that I cover my mouth all the time. And I want to go ahead and say, I'm sorry I do that. I just can't help it. It's in my DNA. I don't know why I do it. But also when you're touching your mouth, that sends a signal to your brain that tells you to relax. So you'll see that quite often when someone's worried about something, they'll start doing this, or when they get stressed, they'll start doing that as well. Because when you push on that, your brain goes, okay, hey man, we need to relax here. Let's dial it down a notch. So that may be a reason she's doing it as well. Obviously she's going to be stressed, so it does make sense. She's sitting at an angle away from the TV with the legs crossed and her arm across her stomach. That suggests, or it indicates, that she doesn't like what she's hearing. She's barriering, but she's barriering in a big way. She's actually turned away from the screen. So I think this is we're seeing a huge display of clusters of cues that let us know she's uncomfortable here. And obviously anybody would be at this point. When it cuts back to George, as he's listening to Casey, he once again does that mouth pursing and that lip pursing and that stress mouth and that downturn sides of his mouth, which is it's really tough to do if you're not feeling that emotionally. It's kind of like the thing we always talk about up here, the grief muscle, where I can't do it, but Greg can do it, where it turns into a little upside down horseshoe right there. So it's really hard to do that. But again, that indicates extreme emotional stress when you see that happening. And when you see pursed lips, quite often it'll mean one of a couple of things. It can mean that you don't agree with what you're hearing, or you see an alternative outcome or a different outcome as to what they're talking about or explaining. And then he starts adapting by rubbing one of those little dogs on the side, and you're right, Mark, there's one dog, 3 dogs, 2 dogs. So I couldn't keep up with that, what's happening with that. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah. As this guy's talking to him about the news story, as Tony is asking him about the news story, you can see either rage or recognition flash through his face. So I took a minute and said, what do I think I see? This guy's pretty contained. And what caused that? No idea. His culture, whatever brought him to this point. As I always say, the organism did what made the organism successful. Some way he's been a very contained guy up to now. So he's still very contained. But what I see, I went back and watched it, is there's a real deviation from baseline as he just juts his chin up in a big way. His lower jaw is out and intakes air. I think that's rage. I think that's contained rage. I think that's real anger at her for what she's saying, because there's a hell of a lot of nervous energy contained. He's adapting not just with a dog or 2 dogs or 3 dogs, but also on the couch. And if you watch his head movement back and forth while he's smirking and his mouth is working, something's going on inside his head. Something. We don't know what. So if I were sitting across the table, I would just say, oh, hold on a minute. Chase, are you protecting her? Is there something you need to tell me? That's an approach I would take. Because when somebody's dancing that much and they don't usually dance that much, something is going on, and you need to lean in. And as a good interrogator or an elicitor or any of those pieces, I want to make contact with the person and make them feel like I'm the only guy in the room, because I am, and I want them to tell me what's going on. It might not be a big deal. It might be something very simple. If it is something very simple, good, we'll move on. If it is something very profound, we'll move on, but we'll move on to that topic and get it exploited. So one big thing, when he says it friggin' didn't happen, the most emphatic we have heard him to date, this is Mr. Containment, and his pitch is strong, his tone is downward, his cadence with his head hits every note that he says, it friggin' didn't happen. That's pretty emphatic for a guy like this. So must mean something. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, and I agree with y'all. Scott, I've always associated this if a person's talking and doing this, I've always associated with an increased willingness to be interrupted. Like, I'm just kind of going on this tangent right here, but if you have an idea while I'm talking, I'm okay with it. I don't know why. No research to back that up. But this is a great clip because it shows a Hollywood-style contrast between a just purely fabricated emotion designed to persuade versus kind of a true muted emotion of someone who's been through hell. And only one side of this has truly been through hell. And it has a long past, probably long past done away with the powerful displays of emotion, I would say, a long time ago, these powerful displays of emotion. And when you see the emotions of Caylee on the screen, you can see such a huge difference in that she's not aware that genuine emotions get muted over time and that there's no need to act and perform like it happened an hour ago. So we're seeing one performance and one reaction, in my opinion. He's comfortable watching the whole time. There's no confirmation glances. He's petting the dog normally, not weirdly, like he's trying to pacify and all that stuff with it. And his hands are relaxed and not drawn back toward the groin where the arteries are. His breathing is unchanged. There's a genuine emotional expression on his face, and it's the same with the mother here. No need to make sure that he's displaying emotion. No need to look at him or check to see if the interviewer is believing it, because she knows a fact to be true. So when someone's creating facts out of thin air, they need to check in with people a lot more often. They need to check in all the time. I love how she opens it up to criticism here too. Does that make any sense to you when she has that little line there? Does that make any sense to you? I've never seen a guilty person do that in my life. And this is hundreds of thousands of hours of interviews that we've we've taken apart, not just on YouTube. We actually exist outside of this this iPad or phone that you're watching us on right now.
One of those tape replays.
You know how hard it was for me to go in front of the grand jury? They kept on asking me the same kind of questions. Who do you believe is responsible? Casey. No matter what happened, drowning, giving her something.
And you said
to
that before the grand jury?
I most certainly did, sir. I most certainly did. I didn't pull any punches. I will go probably to my grave always believing that Casey harmed Caylee.
Look, the burning question has always been, what happened to Caylee on the day she disappeared?
This is extremely important for George and I. This is what we had disagreed upon for the last 15 years.
Casey has a completely new version of what happened on the day Caylee disappeared.
And it all starts with George waking her up and with Caylee nowhere to be found.
I came back around towards the front porch. He's standing there with her. She's soaking wet. I can see him standing there with her in his arms and hand her to me and telling me that it's my fault, that I did that I caused that. And I just collapsed with her in my arms.
Casey knows CPR. I made her take classes.
He takes her from me and he immediately softens his tone and tells me it's going to be okay. That she was going to be okay. That's what he said to me. I wanted to believe him because I wanted her to be okay.
She can say that so easy.
And George, you're hearing this from your daughter's mouth for the first time.
Does that make sense to any rational person, any sane person? You would hand off a lifeless baby soaking wet and not attempt to do something? Plus, George knew CPR.
For 31 days after her daughter's death, Casey admits to hiding this tragedy from everyone, including the authorities. But there have long been these theories that other people, other parties, were involved in the concealment of the crime as well.
This is another chapter in this story. This is, in some ways, the most compelling part of this story for me, these 31 days. That is the next portion that I want to take apart in some detail. Now we're at a place where Casey is telling an entirely different story about the events of those days.
Yeah. During the 31 days, I genuinely believed that Caylee was still alive. My father kept telling me she was okay. I just had to keep following his instructions.
What a good actress you are.
She is an actress.
She got an Academy Award for this one.
What's in her head and her heart where she could say something like that?
When someone can't deal with themselves, with what they did, they project it onto someone else or make excuses. I mean, come on, girl, she can't keep her story straight.
If I'm to believe your daughter, you gave her instructions on how to behave in those 31 days. Did you speak to her?
No, I did not.
Did you text her?
No, I did not.
Did you receive a text from her?
No, I did not.
How did you receive any information about your daughter during these 31 days?
Through Cindy. Cindy told me that she had talked to Casey, everything is good, Caylee's fine, blah, 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 and all that stuff. So I believed each time she told me.
So you were in touch with her?
Yeah, I talked to her almost every day, and I told the sheriff's department that. They had our phone records. They could verify if she talked to her dad or to me. So I called more for Caylee than I did for Casey. A month is a long time not to see your granddaughter who lived with you for almost 3 full years.
And the problem that many people in the public have with you during this period is that you appear to be very accepting of what your daughter was.
But I wasn't.
It sounded that way publicly. Can you acknowledge that?
Because publicly during all this time, they didn't know what I did. They didn't know that I called every day. They didn't know that I hounded her brother. Have you seen your sister?
I think the other thing you didn't do was call the authorities.
But what?
That my daughter and my granddaughter.
I'll go first on this one. At the beginning, we see George's body language. It's open. It's about as open as it can get. His arms are at his sides. His legs are relaxed. Everything seems or is as it should be for someone who's not super stressed, although I'm sure he's super stressed. So it's a little bit odd there. But then he's sitting up with his hands clasped on his knee. on his right knee. And that suggests that he's preparing to answer something, or he's got one, not an answer loaded, but he's got the concept loaded. I don't think he's got specific answers ready to go. Or it suggests he's a bit apprehensive. But I'm thinking it's a little bit of both. And then when they cut back to the mom and dad after the video, he's all laid back and rubbing that dog again, that little dog. So we can't tell how much time, if any, has passed since they watched that video. That's another thing that's bugging me. I know it's bugging Mark too. We're sort of like in this weird time situation where we can't tell what's happening time-wise. Then we see this huge cue that tells us there's an issue there. He's covering his neck and pulling on the skin of his neck really hard. He's specifically covering that suprasternal notch. And that's that little thing right there, that little dimple in your neck. And quite often we'll see women do that when something horrible happens to a child or they get bad news. They'll completely cover that with a couple of fingers sometimes, that suprasternal notch. Men do it too, but we do it in different ways. We may adjust our tie or pull on our shirt a little bit, that kind of thing, to cover that. But when you see that lets you know there's some stress there. Something's up. When he's asked about helping Casey in those 30 days, he answers, no, I did not. So he's not contracting. Most people would say, no. Did you help her do it? No. What's fascinating here is watching the mother act out what he's saying for that little section there. She's doing this, and it looks like this horrible game of charades. She looks like the worst charades player in the world, because as he's talking, she's like doing all these movements. Like you see little kids where there's a song playing and they act out the song. That's what she looks like she's doing. So when the questioning turns to the mother, we see some really great examples of regulators, because she's getting a little bit worked up. She's like, regulators are things you use to control situations and conversations between two people or more than, one person and a few people or several people. Because you may say, hang on just a minute, you wait there, you come over here, stop right there, come this way. So those are the things we see someone control, not a crowd, but a couple of people with. So when you want somebody to stop, you go, hang on a minute, man, hang on a minute. That's a regulator. Different than an illustrator. We see that. It's illustrating. Your brain is hitting on specific words and phrases. It's emphasizing those. But a regulator is like, hold on a second, or come here, you go over here, you wait right there. So keep that in mind, because we've had several questions in the comments about that as well, the difference in regulators and illustrators. But this is a great example of somebody getting worked up to defend themselves, and that's why we're seeing all these little cues of odd gestures that I'm not seeing deception, except I'm getting a hint of it from George. So, and also when she's being questioned and she's getting all worked up, we see his right hand is clenched up and he's got that thumb stuck in there and he's squeezing his thumb. Some people, they'll have as odd as this sounds, there'll be a way they clench their fist. There'll be a finger they cover or squeeze on because they've said, now, when I squeeze this, I'm going to relax. And they'll sit around and meditate on that. And apparently it works really well. So maybe that's one thing he's gotten from being in the police department. When he would come up on a really stressful situation, he would do this, and that would signal him to calm down. Or, back to his little mantra of calming down when I do this. So we're seeing a lot of interesting stuff here, but this is the first time I've seen something where I thought something was iffy with the dad. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I heard that non-contraction denial. No, I did not. I think it may have something to do with just having been in a polygraph exam. And with this guy nearby, the stories nearby, and kind of getting into that groove, I thought that might play a part. Let's talk briefly about Casey here. She's maybe slightly manipulative. She was all about spinning stories. She lied to the cops a lot, proven, and seemed to dodge responsibility. She loves the spotlight throughout the whole trial. Even after, she seemed to kind of crave attention, kind of like she was performing. Doesn't seem to feel much for other people. So that was one of the biggest red flags, and how she didn't seem to show much concern for Caylee. This was a classic sign of somebody who might be ill. Charming and deceptive personality. A lot of people said, she could be extremely charming. That's a tool often used by people who do stuff like this. And rash decision-making is well into her lifestyle that they've proven in court. But this throat covering, I saw the same thing, and pacifying is fear from the dad. but it wasn't during any of his statements. So we always want to look like, when did it occur? It was after the video played and before the question came up. And like, it was a fear response to like, this person's accusing me of stuff. The mother was fluid, flowing, open, comfortable, conversing without selling the emotions. No selling of emotion here. Trying to convey feelings, wasn't confirming glances to anybody or demonizing Casey. And that was a big one. That she didn't choose to demonize her, talk about all the problems she had in high school and middle school and all that, which they very well could have done. And they didn't do it. They didn't resort to it because the truth was on their side. And that's one thing that really stuck out to me. They continue to refuse to really demonize her, call her a liar, call her, they were willing to call her a liar. They were calling her responsible for things, culpable, and a manipulator when someone asked a question about it. That's a difference. Besides, like somebody asks you, what did you have for breakfast? And they go into a giant thing calling somebody a liar. They didn't get asked about it. They did do these things when they were asked specifically. So any behavioral response during the dad's answers here occurred in isolation. I didn't see any clusters. And again, I think we're seeing defiance again of that chin thrust that indicates a confident denial. Mark, what do you got?
So production-wise, this one really jumps the shark for me because we're looking at what I would call the through the looking glass shot from the last documentary about this. And I'm not even sure whether it's the same production company or it's on the same network or channel. It'd be interesting if it was the same production company because they'd be totally self-referential. But here's what is amazing about this, because I don't think I've ever seen this before in a film or a piece of entertainment ever. We're watching people watching a TV screen of a camera watching a mirror. So the subject is looking at a mirror through a camera, through a TV screen to the viewer, and we're watching that viewer. Like the degrees of separation to the subject through mirrors and lenses are just, I've never seen anything like it. So I'm fascinated by this because I've never seen that shot before ever. Film buffs out there, if you've or TV buffs, if you've ever seen that shot before, write it down below. I'd like to know when that shot has ever existed.
Because even when the Kardashians all the time.
Right. Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So the Kardashians
show these days?
So you will watch them watching a TV, watching them. It's possible. It's possible. Yeah. Okay, it's possible. Okay, good.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean it's possible. It's possible. Possible. So look, that's extraordinary for a start, which makes me think, okay, we really got to be careful here because there's so many layers within this production that anything could be happening here. Anything could be happening. Now, that's not to say that our analysis won't and can't have some moments of truth and accuracy to them. But just so you have to understand the work that we have to do in order to try and get that truth and accuracy, we're seeing through all of these mirrors and lenses and smoke and what have you. Anyway, to these non-contractions, because I picked them up, there's not just one, there's three. There's three. I did not. Well, so that's interesting because normally we go, normally we're dealing with one non-contraction, but now we've got three in a row. So now that's a kind of a pattern. So maybe that's a baseline. Maybe that's a baseline, as you say, Chase, from coming from one situation that's been stressful, maybe answering in a certain way in that environment. But again, we don't know the timelines here, but it's certainly interesting that we get three non-contractions in a row. And actually later on, what I noticed is that he does a contraction and then reiterates it with a non-contraction. So, there's some interesting patterns. Now, what can I devise from this? Well, there's that in this particular case, maybe non-contraction is a normal way, an ordinary way of speaking for him. Now I'd have to go and look at other stuff, but to critically think it, we've got to entertain the possibility of that, which I think we are. We are more than entertaining the possibility of this. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Let me give you a really good reason why he may use non-contracted denials, radio talk, because when you say didn't, that doesn't sound like did not. Did not is clear. Did you do this? Did you retrieve this? Did not. It's very clear. So I don't know how long he was a police officer. Can impact the way we speak, for sure. That's number one. In all of this entire video, let's assume that everything we're seeing here is sequential. That's the only thing I care about. The rest of the videos can go away. Don't care. Right here, he's got my attention. And he's got my attention for one single reason. There's a really dramatic change in his behavior that we haven't seen yet. That throat protection, but before the throat protection, it's chin down. That I associate with shame or grief or guilt or something. Then the hand there, and then suddenly realizing it and doing something with his hand. And not just doing something with his hand, but also then grasping with that hand. That to me is a cluster. That's a cluster of behaviors that are different than anything I've seen. Now, if somebody accused me of, I might be pretty damn demonstrative and say, no, that did not happen. And, protect my throat if I felt like it was a threat and all the other things. But he didn't. Did you kill the child? No, I didn't. None of this happened. When we get to a point where they're asking him, did you guide? Did you guide? Not did you help her? Did you guide? He gets all protective. Right after he was rage-filled about her accusing him of something to do with the child's disappearance in the beginning. That makes me feel like the rage was associated with something that she's accusing him of he didn't do. And now he's like, look, I did something, whatever. There's a reason that he has guarded his throat that he has not done up until now. Something has changed, and that's a big something has changed for me. I'm going to give him a pass on the did not because he could be a law enforcement guy. But that weird adapter, right after you see him move his hand down, and if he's been in law enforcement, he's probably heard people protect their throats when they're feeling threatened. So one of the basic body language things that you learn, and when you're doing threat and that kind of thing. But to go from that and look wooden and move his hand down and then do some odd thing is, to me, that's a big deal. Now he's got my utmost attention for this one place, and I would focus on this one place and start poking and prodding and see if I can get that change to occur again. Just my opinion.
You can't change what you know or you don't know.
Exactly.
She's all done?
I think so, yeah.
So feel free to stand up whenever you're ready, so you can stretch your legs.
Stiff.
I know, it hurts.
For 31 days after her daughter's death, Caylee admits to hiding this tragedy from everyone, including the authorities. But there have long been these theories that other people, other parties, were involved in the concealment of the crime as well.
This is another chapter in this story. This is, in some ways, the most compelling part of this story for me, these 31 days. That is the next portion that I want to take apart in some detail.
Now we're at a place where Caylee is telling an entirely different story about the events of those days.
Yeah. During the 31 days, I genuinely believed that Caylee was still alive. My father kept telling me she was okay. I just had to keep following his instructions.
What a good actress you are.
She is an actress.
She got an Academy Award for this one.
What's in her head and her heart where she could say something like that?
When someone can't deal with themselves, with what they did, they project it onto someone else or make excuses. I mean, come on, girl, she can't keep her story straight.
If I'm to believe your daughter, you gave her instructions on how to behave in those 31 days. Did you speak to her?
No, I did not.
Did you text her?
No, I did not.
Did you receive a text from her?
No, I did not.
How did you receive any information about your daughter during these 31 days?
Through Cindy. Cindy told me that she had talked to Caylee, everything is good, Kaylee's fine, blah, 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 and all that stuff. So I believed each time she told me.
So you were in touch with her?
Yeah, I talked to her almost every day, and I told the sheriff's department that. They had our phone records. They could verify if she talked to her dad or to me. So I called more for Caylee than I did for Caylee. A month is a long time not to see your granddaughter who lived with you for almost 3 full years.
And the problem that many people in the public have with you during this period is that you appeared to be very accepting of what your daughter was. But
I wasn't.
It sounded that way publicly. Can you acknowledge that?
Because publicly during all this time, they didn't know what I did. They didn't know that I called every day. They didn't know that I hounded her brother. Have you seen your sister?
I think the other thing you didn't do was call the authorities.
But what?
That my daughter and my granddaughter.
One of those tape replays.
It's wrapped for Cindy right now. You want to head over now and get set up for your final test?
Okay, so let's go through these questions then. So one of the questions that comes up has to do with Caylee's, obviously, her disappearance. And so when I ask you about actively causing the disappearance, what I mean is that you physically did something to move her or hide her or something like that, right? So the question I'll ask you on the test will be, did you actively cause Caylee's disappearance? How would you answer that?
No.
Okay, very good. Another question similar to that is, did you knowingly conceal Caylee's whereabouts?
No. I mean, I didn't know where she was at.
Correct, that's all I'm asking you. So the question again, did you knowingly conceal Caylee's whereabouts?
No.
Okay, so you're struggling with that one a little bit. Tell me why.
Maybe it's because I was so close to our house.
Yeah.
That she was found.
Right. But think about the times you went out looking for her.
Yes.
Did you know where she was that whole time?
No.
Are you sure?
I didn't know where she was at.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
I did not know.
That's all I'm asking.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
This is a true professional here with actual skill. These aren't clarification questions, and they aren't just to check on maybe how a person responded or what happened. Here's an interrogator who is using the machine to establish what we call touch points to dig in specific areas. And I personally think of a polygraph like a metal detector at an airport. It goes off. You have no idea why it went off, but it provides an opportunity for a human to step in and figure out, is it an AK-47 or is it a giant belt buckle that we're dealing with here? That's the importance of having these human skills that this guy clearly has. There's something here, but I don't think it's guilty knowledge. I think there's a good chance he knew she was somewhere close by and that he didn't mention her proximity to the police because he wasn't completely sure if it was true or because he didn't have a precise location. That seems to be where all 7 indicators that I saw were centered around, and that's what I'm seeing here. And those 7 indicators would be hesitancy, digital flexion, the fingers coming together, a shift into chest breathing from abdomen breathing, a stress indicator, an eye flutter, an increase in bodily speed of movement, question preparation. This is increase in posture and rigidity. So this is, you hear the question coming out and you kind of get ready to answer it. And then finally, a very small single shoulder shrug, which indicates a slight lack of confidence in what one is saying. Then it's right back to normal baseline, and all these behaviors disappeared for the I did not know answer. And we see that happen right here. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So first off, again, I'm just hammering at this production. The interviewer here says it's wrapped for Cindy right now. That's interesting because rapping is what you do when you're filming. Not, nowhere in the world of actual police interrogation would you ever go, oh, well, we've wrapped that. To my knowledge, that's a film. So again, it just throws me into this idea of, I see, you're making a film. And I agree. Great interrogator here, great operator here. And at the same time, the most entertaining one I've ever seen. Wait a minute,
Mark, you're saying that you wouldn't say rap in this situation? You'd never say that? Is that what you?
No, you would rap? If you were filming. Everything's everything.
But TV isn't.
No. Yeah.
No, he's saying any entertainment. Yes, he's talking about polygraph. Yeah.
But this is somebody being tested with a polygraph.
Yeah.
So it instantly shows me that the interviewer, who is there as the hard questioner, knows it's a TV show. Totally missed that. He's in one world very more firmly than the other world. and I think paying more respect maybe to the one world than the other world, and the other world has somebody who has their whole social life on the line here, right? And it's like, well, it's wrapped for Cindy, off the set now. Yeah, get her a taxi home. So that's what I'm saying about that. Yeah, and a very entertaining operator here. Great vocal cadence, like lovely movement in the voice, very engaging, nice big gestures as well. I haven't seen that from any other. So they've managed to find, I would say, yes, somebody who's a very good interviewer and is great for TV. Now, we were on one of I think Dr. Phil show, and he had an operator there who was everything that I would expect from an operator. Probably the most boring person I've ever seen. And Phil, bless him, was there, and he got his, the best you could get, which isn't necessarily the most entertaining, and he hadn't got the most entertaining. Well, no way had got the most entertaining by any stretch of the imagination. They've done a really good job here of finding somebody who is good and like great TV as well. So again, it throws me back into, okay, we've got a film here, we've got a TV show going on. Now, what is? I'm with you, Chase. There's something up here. What is it? I can only, did he have a hunch of what had gone on? It's possible. Did he have an instinct for it? Did he have a gut feeling about it? But didn't react on that? It could be that. I didn't know where she was at. I did not know. So there we get that contraction and then that non-contraction together to enforce that. But you're right. There's a cluster of stuff here around that. Do I think that he absolutely knew? Well, I don't really know. But I think there's other reasons why he might have some remorse about it, or a negative bad feeling, or something to protect around that. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to baseline. Again, Chase, you started off by saying the same thing I always say about Cheetos. This is not your Cheeto eating sitting on the couch baseline. This is your on a polygraph baseline. So he starts off and he's okay. His respiration's up. We expect that. But there is a massive change, and I don't know why, and I can't say it's because of guilty knowledge. There's a massive change when he is asked the knowingly conceal question. He's been in a downward telling tone. He goes in an upward lilting tone. His brow has been down, and he's given short answers. Now his brow is up, and he's asking these lilting kind of ends to the way he's talking. And then if you pay attention, he's been finished with that no. When he would say no, he'd do that. He's done. Not now. He starts to fill in information, starts to illustrate with his hands. His forehead's up. His head's moving around. It wasn't before. He's using extra words. Interrogator me wants to say, hold on a minute. Why suddenly are you changing the way you're answering my question? Now, I wouldn't do that, clearly. I would go after him. And then the other thing is he's got that pinch thing going on. Everything has changed. And there's got to be a reason. Now, that reason could be he's suspected. Doesn't matter. I still have to tear open that wound and figure it out. And that's the reason, what we call a micro interview. In an interrogation, it's a lot easier than it is when you're doing polygraph. Polygraph has to have stage, and there are certain parameters you use. And this guy's masterful at using these other points, these other data points. But in an interrogation, I go, hold on a minute. Let's talk about this. And then until I got to a point I saw this much changing in, I would open up the interview again. So if I'm lilting along, asking you about Tuesday, and you say, hey, I got up and I dropped my kids off at school and I went to Starbucks, and I see a change at Starbucks. Well, let's just talk about when you open the door at Starbucks. And I go in and you say, I went to the bathroom. I see a snap there. I go, let's talk about what happened in the bathroom. So we focus on where we see deviation, and there is a massive deviation in his baseline in this one. I don't know why, but that's our job to find out. Scott, what do you got?
All right, I agree with you. I go with everything you just said, Greg, and I'm going to add this to it. I think there's some things we're seeing here that let us know he's got guilty knowledge. And he may not have, I don't think he knew where, and this goes a little bit to what I was saying in the wrap up. This doesn't mean he knows where she was, but I believe I'm under the impression he knows that Casey knows where that child was at the time. So I don't think he's guilty of anything bad, but I do think he has guilty knowledge, or had guilty knowledge, still does, about what happened. I don't think he helped with anything like that. But I think the pause has lasted too long. It's okay for a pause, but this one was way too long from a psychological standpoint. He was thinking, he was running stuff. You're right, Greg. He was, and I see what you're saying, Chase. How, but at the same time, I think it's guilty knowledge, because I think that the cues we're seeing in there from
I'm open
pauses.
to it.
Do what?
I'm open to it.
Oh yeah, I know. But
well, if it were an interview, you would dig out more details and get guilty knowledge leaders and words, but you can't the way this tool is run. That's the problem, is he's on a platform he's using.
No matter what Greg said a minute ago, whatever you did in the Starbucks bathroom, you deserve respect.
It's your business.
yeah. The less said, the better.
Just don't tell us.
Yeah, but I didn't want you to think I was going against you, Chase, because I see what you're saying, and I agree with that. But I'm just thinking this cat knows more than he's saying about what happened, which would make sense because, well, I'll get that at the end. I'm always giving my thing right at the end, but I'm under the impression he knows more than he's admitting. To keep it short,
One of those tape replays.
It's wrapped for Cindy right now. You want to head over now and get set up for your final test?
Okay, so let's go through these questions then. So one of the questions that comes up has to do with Caylee's, obviously, her disappearance. And so when I ask you about actively causing the disappearance, what I mean is that you physically did something to move her or hide her or something like that, right? So the question I'll ask you on the test will be, did you actively cause Caylee's disappearance? How would you answer that?
No.
Okay, very good. Another question similar to that is, did you knowingly conceal Caylee's whereabouts?
No. I mean, I didn't know where she was at.
Correct, that's all I'm asking you. So the question again, did you knowingly conceal Caylee's whereabouts?
No.
Okay, so you're struggling with that one a little bit. Tell me why.
Maybe it's because it was so close to our house.
Yeah.
That she was found.
Right. But think about the times you went out looking for her.
Yes.
Did you know where she was that whole time?
No.
Are you sure?
I didn't know where she was at.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
I did not know.
That's all I'm asking.
How much of your lives, even now, all these years later, is still consumed by the story, your daughter, your granddaughter, and what happened?
On a percentage basis, I think it's really close to 100%.
What?
Maybe like 99%.
What?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
On a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Look at every time you walk around the house. There's a memory of something.
Would you mind if we go to the area where Caylee's remains were found?
The one street you followed all the way down, turn left, you turn right. We'd been down about 100 yards on the right-hand side. There were so many adults that came here and they would pray. There used to be people, row after row, car after car. People would be over here. There could be a couple hundred people here at one time. But how can I tell people don't go down there? We've tried. I've been on the local news trying to keep people away.
Some would suggest that you want the memory of this to go away.
Caylee isn't here. She's not here. There's times I wish I was here, instead of her.
Why?
I did. If I could talk to Gary and I said, listen, send Caylee back here to be with her Grammy, I'd have God take me. I tried to almost take my own life because of it. I so much wanted to be with her. She meant everything to me. To me. I know she meant everything to Cindy too, but we showed our affection in different ways, I guess, for her.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
One thing that stood out to me, I had to rewind right away, is he says there's so many adults that came down here. Not people, adults. There's so many adults that came down here. I thought that was unusual. And maybe it's just because he thought, maybe just it would be young people that are interested in this. But I think and this is my opinion, but his desire to keep people away from the scene where the body was found, I think is rooted in two things based on the emotions that we've seen throughout this entire interview. And based on every single emotional peak that he's had, there's two things that I think bother him. Number one the crime scene wasn't being visited by people supporting Caylee. They were what I would probably call crime tourists. And I think that probably upset him. And you can see it every time the public interest starts to come up. The second thing is, I think the accusations have been a huge blow to his life. And the people near his house coming to visit the scene are very different than the people in the grocery store who probably don't follow the case, don't recognize him, don't judge him or anything like that. So he's got crowds of people coming by his house who may or may not be very suspicious of him being a murderer. So that's a huge part of Maslow's pyramid, is this tribe and belonging thing. So we're hitting it from two different angles here, those two reasons. That's all I got on this one. Scott, what do you got?
All right, I think this is another great example of the editing problems they're having here. When that drone shot happens and that thing's flying over and we see the car pulling over, hell, it pulls up into the grass. Watch this when it comes back. And then when it cuts to the guy getting out of the car, hell, he's in the middle of the road. He steps out like they own the road. He just steps out in the middle of the street. So I couldn't get past that on this one either. It was just too much. The body language in this seems as it should be. It's a bit odd, but there's nothing to write home about. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. Look, if you want to judge him for the truthfulness of the feelings that he's going through, just do one thing. Imagine his daughter playing this scene. Imagine his daughter playing this scene. Like, how different would it be? What would she be doing in this? Would it be that subtle? Would she be able to get through sentences really, really easily because she knows what she wants to hit? Would she hit certain words really carefully because she really understands what she wants to get across? Has she already worked out the script before the question is asked? And where's he at the moment? Do you think he's really organized this? Do you think he's thinking on his feet? The emotions are flowing through and trying to be repressed and flowing through again. There are many ideas going through his head. One, I think, is going to feel more truthful to you. Now, it doesn't mean that he's telling the truth, but I just think it's a nice little exercise. You know, how would his daughter play this same scene? What would that look like? Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, a couple of things. If you want to know the dynamic between him and his wife, look at this person versus the one sitting next to his wife. Look at how much more fluid he is and how much more open he is in speaking. That doesn't speak well to people sitting looking at each other and going, looking locked down. He's using his hands to illustrate a lot more than we've seen. And Mark, to your point, if he had prepared something to say, it wouldn't have been how I choose to show my affection. Would not have used those words if he had prepared an answer. Guarantee you, somebody who is worried about being perceived as doing the wrong thing is going to be avoiding those words. We see it all the time as they dance around the word, or they use words like mommy. The interviewer tried to use a provocative statement, but he used the wrong one. When he said, you know, it looks like you might want it to go away, I would have used something like, you know, most people want to enshrine the place where a person dies. Now, if he has guilty knowledge and knows the child didn't die there, he's probably going to stumble on that. So that's a provocative statement that gives you a better opportunity. But I think overall, like you said, this looks more genuine than somebody coming in with prepared words and a clean statement and not stumbling over and making mistakes.
One of those tape replays.
How much of your lives, even now, all these years later, is still consumed by the story, your daughter, your granddaughter, and what happened?
On a percentage basis, I think it's really close to 100%.
What?
Like 99%.
What?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
On a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Look at every time you walk around the house. There's a memory of something.
Would you mind if we go to the area where Caylee's remains were found?
The one street you followed all the way down, turn left, you turn right. We'd been down about 100 yards on the right-hand side. There were so many adults that came here and they would pray. There used to be people, row after row, car after car. People would be over here. There could be a couple hundred people here at one time. But how can I tell people don't go down there? We've tried. I've been on the local news trying to keep people away.
Some would suggest that you want the memory of this to go away.
Caylee isn't here. she's not here. There's times I wish I was here, instead of her.
Why?
I did. If I could talk to Gary and I said, listen, send Caylee back here to be with her Grammy. I'd rather have God take me. I tried to almost take my own life because of it. I so much wanted to be with her. She meant everything to me. To me. I know she meant everything to Cindy too, but we showed our affection in different ways, I guess, for her.
Did you ever have sexual contact with Casey? You answered no.
No.
Did you ever touch Casey for sexual gratification? You answered no. And as an adult, have you ever had sexual contact with a minor, which would include any minor? And you answered no. Okay. I asked you the same questions multiple times during the examination, George.
Yes.
The results of that examination, George, are George, the scope of one of your exams had to do with whether or not you were involved in child molestation with your daughter, Casey, and as well with your granddaughter, Caylee. Your results are you passed this test, George, with no deception indicated to all of the relevant questions. In my professional opinion, you were truthful.
No doubt. I would never have stood for it. No doubt. No doubt. Oh my God. Oh man.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, this is a good one. Mark, I'm back to your empathy thing. Watch this interviewer's blink rate go through the roof with apprehension as this thing's going. And our guy, George, is really apprehensive and jittery about what's going on. He's sitting back. He's got emotion down to the right, looking down, lots of those hard lip compressions in this entire lead up. There's no signs of shame. There's no signs of that protecting the throat anymore or any of that. All of this control is around trying to control emotion. And I agree with you, Chase, you see those muscles on the side of the neck coming up. And when they give him relief, I think he's just thinking, this is one more burning pile on my front porch that I have to stomp. And one way or the other, I'm going to deal with it. If I'd said no, I would, let's hope it comes out right. And when it does, he just kind of comes apart. He just falls apart. And I think that shows that this guy's been trying to hold out. I don't think he's been deceptive. There's one exception. We'll talk about that in a minute. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I think this is what we call a cathartic release. Because after all of these years, him thinking, what can I do to show people? What can I do to show my innocence? How can I prove this? And this is a gamble. But luckily they found a pro. And this is a true professional in the craft. And that's what we're seeing, all these relief. It's not like, oh, I hope they don't find me out. And I'm going to cry because of that. The cry is at the release. So it's a gas escaping here.
Yep.
Scott, what do you got?
All right. The thing that I got two things here, but the thing that caught my interest the most was the daggers coming out of the mom's eyes to the interviewer. Once he tells him that he passed it, she looks at him and stares at him like she could kill him, like she's going to kill him. So that was fascinating for me to see that. I think she's under the impression this guy was after her husband and her, trying to make him look bad. And I think that says a lot about what happened in this whole thing, in this whole this series of interviews that we saw. So I think she's really mad. So watch her when he comes back, because she just turns to him and just stares, doesn't blink anything, just bang, just stares at him. And George, I think, just shows the normal body language of someone who's relieved. And like you said, Chase, a cathartic release of emotions from being so pent up for so long. And I think that's probably the reason they did this, because as we were talking, like Mark was saying earlier, it's crazy to be doing this on TV with all those people there doing that kind of thing. But I think George wanted to show his honesty, or show that he didn't do this so bad that he was willing to do just about anything to make that happen. Mark, what do you got?
So I agree, Chase. This is a very professional person, professional just like myself, who has audited all of these films and made some scrappy notes about it. And I have in my pad an answer to all of this, which will blow your minds and pay off this whole series.
Here we go.
And commercial.
Have you ever Googled yourself and been...
Right, exactly. It's like, why has this guy got a scrappy notepad? He said beforehand that he'd handed his results to another auditor who's made a report on this. You would come in with the... But clearly they've gone, man, can we have something that you can, like, you know, fold over and go, we've got to string this one out. The build up to this, which I don't know whether we'll see or not, but the build up to it, it's at least a 3-camera shot, which means they had to do the introduction to this part at least 3 times. So one of them's a tracking shot, and then they've got another shot behind it, and you can't, which means you've got to set it up twice for that. And then you've got a number of other angles. It means they have to do that again and again and again, right, and get the guy to do, could you make some notes on a little pad and then like turn the pad to the bit, like you'd have the answer right in front of you.
We got to send one of the interns over to Office Depot and get one of those little flip
get one of those no, it doesn't have to be any good, just whatever cheap, any cheap thing that you can get hold of. He just needs to write a few, look like he's handwritten some stuff, you know. I mean, it's just extraordinary. So to your point, Scott, like, I think it is so brave that this guy, because I wouldn't trust this at all. If I was innocent, and they went, do you fancy doing a thing, you know, with a polygraph and like on TV? It's like, it'll all be straight and above board. Don't worry, we're on your. I'd go, no, actually, I'd probably rather people think that I'm guilty than put myself in your hands right now, because I don't know what the hell your game is and what you're trying to do here. So Chase, I totally agree. Great professional doing it, but bizarre ending there with the notepad there, just to ramp up our emotions so we can have that cathartic moment as well, because we've spent, you know, an hour and a half watching this thing. Like, we want our moment as well to go, he didn't do it. So great entertainment.
One of those tape replays.
Did you ever have sexual contact with Casey? You answered no.
No.
Did you ever touch Casey for sexual gratification? You answered no. And as an adult, have you ever had sexual contact with a minor, which would include any minor? And you answered no. Okay. I asked you the same questions multiple times during the examination, George. The results of that examination, George, are George, the scope of one of your exams had to do with whether or not you were involved in child molestation with your daughter, Casey, and as well with your granddaughter, Caylee. Your results are you passed this test, George, with no deception indicated to all of the relevant questions. In my professional opinion, you were truthful.
No doubt. I would never have stood for it. No doubt. No doubt.
Oh my God. Oh man.
Just one more thing.
All right, Mark, how's it looking to you up to this point?
Well, we've seen many productions, haven't we? This one is quite extreme. You know, great test, though, to try and pull this apart and work out, you know, what might be true and what might be false about it. But I think we've got a fairly good, you know, take on this, which is, you know, in the main, this guy is absolutely telling the truth about his non-involvement. There may be some ideas that he had about something, you know, hunches potentially, I think. But other than that, it's straight up innocence as far as I can pull apart. Chase, what do you think?
Yeah, copy paste what Mark said, put it in my mouth here, and I'll add that people put a little too much faith in polygraphs to where like there's this huge sigh of relief. The polygraph is not doing the measuring. It's a human doing the measuring and interpretation of that. And kudos to this guy for getting a second opinion and going out to get, it's the exact opposite of what most behavior experts would do, is to consult somebody else. Greg?
Yeah, guys, the reason I like what we do is I always say we're only marginally better than average people, but when you put four of us together and we get to a common answer, it's probably much better. The odds are much better that we're accurate. Let me tell you, the only things that I saw here were around two areas. One was around her accusing him of bringing this body, and there was rage, and he was angry with her about that. The second one, I saw that protection around, did you know or did you help conceal? Don't know what that means because we didn't get good questions. We didn't get to follow through. But if I ever met him and was talking to him, I'd be poking those areas and saying, boom, boom, boom. Very clear, very clear. No sexual contact with minors. No involvement with putting the body somewhere, whether he helped conceal or not is the only place I saw that. And I would love to talk to him about it. Sure, he's had enough of talking to people about this, but that's it for me. And Scott, what do you got?
I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. However, I do think that he's got a little bit of guilty knowledge. I really do, especially when I talked about it earlier. I think there's something there. And I'm not saying he did anything. I don't think he did. I think you're right. I think he's innocent of doing anything.
Don't know about that. Yeah.
I think his daughter may have come to him and said, look, what do I do now? And he said, do this, which he'd be in trouble for. But I don't think it had anything to do with what happened to the child or anything that he was accused of doing with his daughter. I don't think any of that happened. But I do have a feeling he knows what happened. And that's just what I think. That's my impression, just an opinion. I think he knows what happened, and I think he has guilty knowledge of that, and that's what he's hiding. That's the only thing I saw. The only part, deceptive part for me, were those little sections where everything changed completely from his baseline. All right, fellas, thanks for another good one, and we'll see you next time.
So what do you got?